When you start with a fabric project, start by selecting several colors that you feel work together for the big major parts of your artwork. When you start the tracing process, set your fabric on top of the image you'd like to trace. Use chalk or a pencil to copy the lines, checking often the designs and shapes that you need to be creating. So look underneath, move the fabric, and keep drawing. If a fabric piece isn't large enough by itself, you can cut out multiple fabric pieces to fill space. Use pins to secure shapes to your base fabric piece. Remember, always cut out a square first or use scraps in order to save fabric. Once every piece is cut, it's time to start sewing. You can sew using a variety of techniques, some of which I show here. I use the French knot and a series of threaded needles and knots to create some different textures in my work. I also use the running stitch and a few other kinds of stitches to secure the various applique pieces to the fabric base. At the end of each string, take the time and tie off each string before you cut your thread so your stitching does not come undone. Doing 2 tack stitches like I'm showing here in the same place will do this for you. As you start securing fabric pieces to your base, be sure to put the pins back where they belong so they do not get lost and no one can hurt themselves. This kind of stitching is called an overlock or overcast stitch, where you go along the edge of the fabric pieces to catch them right in the correct spots. This kind of stitch is called a running stitch, where you have the needle and thread go in and out of the fabric. You can also do a bunch of in and outs all at once before pulling the thread through, which helps to speed along the sewing and tacking process. This is a weaving embroidery technique that involves going around a single point using simply thread, and then weaving in and out of the threads in order to create a centralized point. Sometimes as you sew, you might find you need to shift or move things and repin them so that everything sits correctly and flat against the fabric. This kind of stitch is called a chain stitch, where you add an extra embellishment by leaving the loop loose and catching it with the next stitch before creating your following stitch. It creates some extra texture and lines within your work. When you intentionally follow linear information with your stitches, like I am doing here to create the edges of the houses and the details, that is called embroidery. So when you're intentionally creating pictures with thread, it's called embroidery stitches. And there's lots of different ways to do it, but these are straight lines. Use scissors to trim the edge of your fabric if necessary when you are done with all your stitching. To bend wire or metal, please use the appropriate tool. In my case, I needed a pair of pliers. The stitch I use here is called a blanket stitch and helps create a finished border or edge.